Welcome to Eternal Elements Learning Podcast brought to you by Atyasa Online. These podcasts are a part of the audio certificate programs on Atyasa Online. You're free to take these podcasts on your desired portal also, should you only wish to learn on the go. Thank you so much for engaging on these podcasts, and you can connect with the author on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Welcome back. This is Niket Karajagi from Eternal Elements brought to you by Tariffs Online. We're talking about international business, and this is season 8. I talked about the World Bank in the earlier podcast of mine, and I talked about a fact that the world rallied together with the idea that an international trading organization must get created. IPO was an intellectual precursor of WTO, but interestingly, the International Trade Organization never came into existence. It never came into existence because something very interesting happened. Let's understand that in this podcast, because that's another important aspect of the economic history of the world. The post-World War II effect to bring the International Trade Organization into being was led by multilateral negotiations. The whole idea was that we need to ensure that the international trade starts happening between countries, because they realized that the cooperation and international trade was the only way to reconstruct the economies that were devastated. So what happened? What happened was that the United Nations, as an intergovernmental organization which aimed to maintain international peace and security, was developed by friendly nations and was founded on the 24th of October 1945. Now, United Nations also started participating in the whole idea of creation of the IPO. So what happened was that Economic and Social Council of the United Nations created a conference on trade and employment. This is to be held in Havana in 1947. And while this was happening, there was a preparatory committee for IPO also that got planned alongside. Now, during the Havana conference, something interesting happened. The Havana Charter was signed by 54 out of 56 countries, and an organization was proposed. The proposed organization was a Director General heading the Executive Board, 18-member Executive Board, and 8 countries of economic importance to be the permanent members and others to be elected. While this was happening, trade negotiations were also happening, and around 45,000 tariff concessions worth $10 billion of trade actually happened during the Havana Charter. What happened later? While this Havana conference was happening and the charter was being signed, the preparatory committee proceeded with tariff negotiations even before the organization called IPO came up. And this negotiation, which happened, 45,000 tariff concessions and $10 billion of trade, it led to the formation of GATT, the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. It's important to understand it's a protocol of provisional application. So GATT was seen to be not a very permanent affair. There were 23 founding members. The countries that completed tariff negotiations became the contracting parties to GATT. These contracting parties, therefore, started ensuring that the trade between them commenced. And the whole idea of GATT was that there would be series of negotiations that would continue. And those series of negotiations would keep cutting back tariffs so that the international business starts becoming effective and it moves across the boundaries, across the geographies. That is what GATT was, a general agreement on tariff and trade, with the idea that tariff concessions had to be provided and barriers had to be cut. This was GATT. This was the formation of GATT. But when GATT was formed and when it became operational, countries still maintained their protectionism, and the mercantile approach again started showing its head up. Now, what happened was, by then, certain economies failed, and certain governments had to take actions to protect their economies. So, a lot of unscrupulous ways of again bringing back trade barriers started happening. The non-tariff barriers came in, administrative barriers came in, standards came in. Also, by then, services moved in, and GATT never looked at services because it was a general agreement on tariffs and trade for the movement of goods. Services came later. While services did come later, also what happened was the issues of intellectual property started happening. Now, when all this started happening, suddenly we realized that the system of GATT was being misused and it started becoming ineffective. And because of that, countries came together and started working towards each other and started ensuring towards maintaining the order of trade to ensure that the trade in goods happened effectively, the trade in services happened effectively, and the intellectual property was also being taken care of and maintained effectively. This led to the birth of the World Trade Organization. We shall discuss the World Trade Organization in the next podcast, because in today's world we are actually living in a world which is the world of the World Trade Organization. Thank you very much. This is Niket Karajagi signing off from Eternal Elements, brought to you at Tessa Online. We discussed GATT, and we are now discussing the movement from GATT to the World Trade Organization, one of the most important organizations in the history of economy, where the world came together and started ensuring that the trade starts happening effectively and the intellectual properties are also taken care of. Thank you very much. This is Niket Karajagi signing off from Eternal Elements. I'll see you in the next podcast where we will talk about the World Trade Organization. Thank you very much. See you soon. Keep listening to the podcast. I'm sure you're enjoying them. We are in season 8. Bye-bye.